Living with chronic and incurable diseases is not easy for anyone, but when you have an incredibly rare disease that only a few people around the globe suffer from, things become even more difficult. There are some mind-blowing diseases and disorders that have been identified in very few people. Some of these are so rare that scientists and physicians don't even have a name for them. From disorders causing excessive skin to grow on the body, to incurable deformities that make it impossible for the person to move, all kinds of ailments have been identified by experts who are working every day and every night to find a cure for them. Here are 15 people with extremely rare diseases you had no idea about. Number 1. Kayla Hansen. Kayla Hansen is a 33-year-old woman who is burning from the inside out. She's battling an agonizing condition that has driven many of its victims to take their own lives. The unfortunate woman from Arizona has claimed that her body is burning from the inside out. Kayla Hansen was informed by her doctors that she suffers from the worst case of complex regional pain syndrome that they've ever seen. The people who suffer from this crippling, poorly understood, and less-known condition tend to experience excruciating pain that can feel like they're being burned, stung, or stabbed. Kayla's disease has only progressed over the years, and she's now no longer able to drive or even wash her own hands. Her skin begins blistering, which she considers burning, because of the complex regional pain syndrome. Her life has been turned upside down since she crushed her hand in a car door years ago, as this incident triggered her condition. And speaking to a news channel, she would say that CRPS is a condition where your nervous system attacks your entire body. In some people, it will contain itself in one arm or one foot or one leg, but in her case, she had it in full body form. It's rated as the highest pain disease in the world and outranks any amputations. It outranks natural childbirth, any broken bones, and more painful than cancer. Kayla also said that it feels like someone has dumped gasoline on her and set her on fire and then thrown her into a trash compactor. She suffers from stage 4 CRPS, which is considered the absolute worst form of this rare condition. It began in her right arm and progressed to her entire body and even her scalp in just 2 years. She uses a special cream designed for people who are undergoing radiotherapy for pain relief, but it doesn't help all that much, and her doctors didn't believe her when she presented with burns on her arms that it was happening from inside. But then they saw the lesions developing with their own eyes, and according to experts, it affects around 1 in 4,000 people to some degree. Number 2. Mitchell Herndon. Mitchell Herndon is a Missouri teenager who suffered from a rare neurological disorder that ravaged his entire body. The condition, caused by a genetic mutation, has been diagnosed in only a handful of people around the world. It would rob Mitchell of his ability to walk. He also lost his hearing and eyesight progressively. He used to be a witty and sporty teenager who was very close with his siblings, and at age 19, he was a freshman at St. Louis University when he had to drop out because of his progressing condition. The disease is so rare that it might actually be named after him. He suffered from the neurological disorder for more than 7 years and lost both his mobility and freedom to it. He wasn't in pain. In fact, he couldn't feel the pain or the pressure at all. He sought help from specialists from all around the world and traveled across the country for better treatment options. On the Undiagnosed Disease Network, Mitchell found another patient with the same mutation, and it was a 14-year-old South Korean boy. Dr. Hugo Bellin had been working on a potentially life-saving drug for Mitchell's condition. It was a powerful antioxidant called NAC-amide and seemed quite promising. However, the drug had not been approved by the FDA and Mitchell was running out of time. His neurologist tried hard to get the drug approved, but unfortunately it became too late. Mitchell was admitted to the hospital as his disease had progressed and then spread to his brain. Soon afterwards, he became unresponsive and was then placed on life support. And just an hour after that, the FDA gave the approval for the medication, but he had already suffered the irreversible effects of brain damage, and there was no hope for recovery. Afterwards, he would be removed from life support under his own wishes that he had expressed beforehand. He wanted his body to be donated to research, and so that someone else who suffered from the same condition could have a fighting chance. Number 3. Ashley Kerpeel. Ashley Carpiel comes from Georgia and suffers from an extremely rare, debilitating condition called fibrodysplasia ossificans progressive. Ashley is completely immobile. She cannot dress herself, cook, or even comb her own hair since the disease has progressed. The unfortunate woman was diagnosed with the rare condition back when she was just a child. This disease has transformed her into a human statue and left her unable to even lift a finger. According to reports, less than 1,000 people in the world suffer from this condition. It causes the patient's muscles to turn into bone and leaves them immobile just like Ashley. According to her, she knows that even as an adult, FOP will eventually take the little mobility she has left. She said that she's not going to dwell on it, and it's going to happen whether she wants it to or not. She's been living a great life for 37 years and the ride is not yet over. Whatever the world throws at her, she will take on. She needs round-the-clock care and does very little for herself. She cannot cook or even help her family members in the kitchen, and she's pretty much wheelchair-bound or bed-bound and needs help with everyday life tasks. Her life became even more hard when she had to get her right arm amputated, and this happened because doctors had misdiagnosed a lump on her neck. Her family has supported her at every step and continues to help in any possible way. Her mother has always been at her side to carry out any tasks that Ashley is unable to do. She has admitted that she does feel like a burden on other people, but is blessed to have such a caring and supportive family. She tried to spread positivity and awareness regarding her condition and also advocates for finding a treatment for this debilitating disease. Number 4. Tessa Bruner. Tessa Bruner was the only child of her parents and was just 4 years old when she would be diagnosed with an extremely rare genetic disorder. The deadly illness is something that most doctors have never even heard of. There's no treatment or cure for it. Her parents, Sean and Trista Bruner, were devastated when they found out about this, but little Tessa's spirit has always been high. Her mother would say that it was hard to know that her child was going to die and that there was nothing she could do about it. Tessa was the only child in Florida who suffered from CLN2, which is also called Batten's disease. It's an incredibly rare nervous system disorder. Her parents would notice that the speech delay at 18 months, which was the first sign, and afterwards she progressively began having more symptoms. Tessa suffered from muscle weakness and would bump into things, and she also had vision problems and then seizures. Initially, she was misdiagnosed with epilepsy, but when she took a genetics test, it would be revealed that she was actually suffering from Batten's disease. This condition can strip children of their motor functions and skills, along with cognitive processing. It's so rare that so far only around 300 cases have ever been recorded in history. The condition does decrease the patient's life expectancy to just 8 to 10 years. Tessa underwent intense infusion treatments every other week, as it was the only available treatment that could essentially help to slow down the progression of her symptoms. Her mother has made it her mission to spread awareness regarding genetic testing so that such conditions can be caught sooner and treatments can be developed. Number 5. Lucy Weiss. Lucy Weiss is a little girl whose parents were quite worried about the persistent skin rashes and infections that she was suffering from. But what they didn't know was that their daughter had a rare immune deficiency disorder. The condition actually affects 1 in a million people. Her symptoms kept escalating until an infectious disease specialist finally figured out what was wrong. Lucy would be born in June of 2008, and immediately doctors would notice that she had a benign newborn rash that blanketed her entire body. To her mother, the rash seemed like freckles that would scab over and fall off. Lucy's parents thought that she was just extra vulnerable to germs. Eventually, an infectious disease specialist noticed that the occurrence of thrush, which is an opportunistic infection that usually affects patients with HIV, was extremely unusual in such a young patient. It would strongly suggest a malfunctioning immune system. Her symptoms were found to be consistent with a rare disorder called Job syndrome, also known as hyper-IgE syndrome. Immunodeficiency is caused by a mutation in the STAT3 gene. The defect tends to overstimulate as well as understimulate the immune system. This in turn leads to severe bacterial and fungal skin infections that cause boils and lesions. The disease can be both inherited and occur as a result of a spontaneous mutation. There is no known cure for it. Physicians usually prescribe antibiotics and antifungal medications to prevent and treat infection. Genetic testing conducted in 2012 would reveal that Lucy did in fact have the mutation. She underwent a bone marrow transplant, after which her health would significantly improve. She is currently homeschooled, but her parents hope that she will be able to go to college one day and live a normal life. Number 6. Ellie McGinn. Ellie is the daughter of Beth and Mike McGinn, and she suffers from a condition that experts describe as being both rare and a mouthful. That's why Ellie has given it a new name, calling it the Awesome Disease. The little girl mastered walking late in 2010, and that was when her parents would notice that something wasn't quite right. Their 3-year-old would just take a few steps, and then her knees would buckle and she'd fall to the floor. Ellie would complain that her feet hurt and were tired all the time, and soon afterwards, she would not be able to even keep up with her friends. According to her mother, Ellie couldn't go on the balance beam at a party, and that's when she realized that something was truly off. The family soon went to several specialists, and they were told that it was nothing serious and that Ellie was just a loosey-goosey child. They tested her for lupus as well as lead poisoning, and also received multiple MRIs to screen for cancer and other diseases. 6 months later, she finally received the diagnosis at Children's National Health System. Ellie had a condition that even I cannot pronounce, which featured a brainstem and spinal cord involvement and lactate elevation. It is one of a cluster of metabolic diseases and interferes with the functions of mitochondria, the energy producers of cells, and damages the white matter in the central nervous system. The condition would first be identified in 2007, and there are only about 100 known reported cases worldwide. Ellie's parents would be informed that she would need a walker by the age of 8 and would be in a wheelchair by the time that she was a teenager, as there was no cure or treatment available. The McGinns then were devastated, but they did not give up hope, and after a few months of getting tested by specialists at Baltimore's Kennedy Kruger Institute, her energy and appetite picked up and she stopped falling down. Today, she has no trouble walking, but her legs do hurt if she runs. Her hands get tired when she writes, so she has to take breaks in between. Number 7. Jill Price. Jill Price is a famous American author who hails from Southern California. She was the first person to be diagnosed with a condition called hyperthymesia. It was her case that would inspire research into the disease. She's also co-authored a book on the subject, and her condition is characterized by a highly superior autobiographical memory. She's been able to recite details of every day of her life from the time that she was just 14 years old. Jill can recall various obscure moments with great detail. Her case would initially be researched by a team at the University of California, Irvine, and the team included Elizabeth Parker, Larry Cahill, and James McCall. The first report on the study of her brain would be published in 2006. Her brain would be subject to a scan in which her hippocampus and prefrontal cortex were found to be normal. Research by psychologist Gary Marcus, however, would claim that her brain resembled those of people who suffered from obsessive-compulsive disorder. Dr. Julia Simi from the University of Edinburgh has speculated that Price's abilities are intimately tied to her visualizations of time and space, a form of synesthesia. Because of her condition, Jill Price lives with her parents, Harrison Harvey and Stacy Harvey. Number 8. Ashland Blocker. Ashland is quite popular as the girl who feels no pain. She suffers from an extremely rare disorder called congenital insensitivity to pain with anadrosis, which is usually a death sentence, as most victims of the disease die as toddlers. But the Georgia teenager refused to let her condition overpower her spirit. She competes in beauty pageants, plays in the school band, and helps other children who suffer from the same disease. Life has not been easy for her, and her parents, Tara and John, first noticed that something was off when she was only 8 months old. She never cried when she was hungry or had a diaper rash, and as a baby, she wasn't even irritated by a corneal abrasion. That's when they learned that Ashland could feel no pain. The condition affects less than 100 people across the United States each year. As a child, she would constantly injure herself, burn her hands, and more, because she did not feel any pain. Her parents had to tape up her fingers to keep her from hurting herself. Ashland has been working with researchers from the University of Florida to help to learn more about pain, and they're hopeful that she might help them to create new treatments for people with chronic pain. Number 9. Anna Welklow. Anna Welklow is a little girl who was born with a condition called harlequin ichthyosis. It's a rare skin disease that causes her skin to harden and crack, and only a few moments after she was born, via C-section, the newborn skin began to thicken and crack. This happened almost as soon as the air hit her skin, and everyone knew that something was off because wounds began forming all over her body. Her eyes were swollen shut and the circulation in her hands and feet had been cut off. Anna's condition causes newborns to form thick plates of skin that split and crack around their bodies. The hardening of the skin can affect the infant's appearance and cause their lips and eyelids to turn inside out. It can also create constriction rings around their chest and make it difficult for them to breathe and eat. Previously, infants with harlequin ichthyosis rarely survived past a few days. But these days, medical advancements have been made and has increased the lifespan of these children, and they can live well into their teenage years or 20s with normal intellectual development. Treatment for this condition is extremely intense, involving a detailed skincare regimen meant to keep the skin moisturized, clean, and infection-free. Anna's body creates so much extra skin that she consumes nearly 2,100 calories per day. She needs to be bathed in aquaphor every few hours and has to undergo physical and occupational therapy twice a week. Number 10. Rama Hurana. Rama was a Nigerian girl who was born without limbs and spent most of her life in a plastic bowl. She was just 19 years old when photos would appear online and shook everyone who saw them. She suffered from a mysterious disease that prevented her limbs from developing properly. She was always in pain. She passed away in December of 2016, and the news of her death would be shared by a local journalist. He was also the photographer who took the photos that went viral and made everyone aware of Rama's plight. Her arms and legs had stopped developing when she was just 6 months old. Unable to move or do almost anything on her own, she lived with her family in the village, and because of her chronic pain and inability to move, she would spend most of her waking hours in a plastic bowl that family members used to transport her around. Her brother would take her to Kano to beg for handouts every day. A journalist would then donate a wheelchair to the family a year before she died. Her father explained that she didn't learn how to sit even when she was 6 months old, and it started with a fever, followed by a stomach pain, and then soon her limbs became useless. Despite all of her disabilities, though, she hoped to run a small business one day. Number 11. Mahindra Arawar. Mahindra Arawar suffered from a condition called congenital myopathy. It made the muscles in his neck so weak that his head hung at an almost 180-degree angle. In February of 2016, the teenager would receive a pioneering surgery to straighten his neck. The surgery was completed after a successful international fundraising campaign. The operation seemed to be a success, but his family's happiness would be short-lived as the boy did not survive. His parents announced that he had passed away suddenly while watching television. The doctor, who is a former NHS surgeon, performed the operation, said that he was left shocked by the untimely demise. He postulated that a massive cardiac or pulmonary event might have taken place, and in such cases, there aren't many premonitory symptoms. He said that he thought myopathy and poor chest muscles had caught up with him in the end. He was amongst the bravest of children that he had seen since his return to India, and he sees the most terrible and neglected deformities. Mahindra's parents were devastated by the loss of their beloved son. They had waited for years for him to be able to be better. His surgery took 10 hours, in which discs were removed from his neck and replaced with bone grafts from his pelvis. Afterwards, a metal plate was fitted into his neck to secure it to being straight, and he was only 13 years old at the time of his death. Number 12. Abul Bayandar. Abul Bayandar is a Bangladeshi man who suffers from a rare disease called tree man syndrome. This skin disorder has caused his hands and feet to resemble that of tree branches. Abul is 31 years old and makes a living driving his rickshaw. The unfortunate man had been admitted and underwent multiple operations in 2016, and afterwards he would have to get more surgeries as his condition did not improve. According to an international publication, his hands and feet seem like branches that are sprouting from a tree. His doctor said that he skipped treatment earlier, due to which his condition worsened, and according to one report from CNN, he was just 10 years old when he first noticed the lesions. The surgeries were conducted in 2017 and came to his rescue, and afterwards he was able to use his hands and feet once again. The rare genetic disorder that he suffers from is so uncommon that just around 12 cases have ever been identified around the globe. The people who suffer from this disease also have a high risk of developing skin cancer. Number 13. Tom Tennant. Around 29 years ago, a baby would be born with a mind-boggling condition. When his parents saw him for the first time, they simply could not believe their eyes. Tom Tennant was born with a unique condition because of which he would be dubbed the real-life Benjamin Button. The newborn had enough skin to fit a healthy 5-year-old. He would be born in Southeast Australia in 1993, and his parents had already been warned about the possible complications during his development. His mother said that her heart had come up to her throat, but at the same time, it was simply lovely to pick him up and cuddle him. At the time, doctors had no idea about this condition and therefore had no treatment plan. Many tests would be conducted, and it was a difficult time for the family. Tom, however, displayed the typical behaviors of a boy his age and was not even aware of his rare condition. Soon afterwards, researchers would discover similarities between Tom's appearance and that of Shar-Pei puppies. He also had 100 times more hyaluronic acid in his skin, just like the puppies, and thankfully as he grew up, the excess skin would reduce. He still looked different as a young boy though. These days he's 29 years old and is happily married. Number 14. Belle Hutt. Belle Hutt is a 27-year-old personal trainer, but she's not like your normal trainer. Belle can fall asleep up to 16 times per day. She suffers from a rare medical condition called narcolepsy, and strangers often think that she's drunk because she seems super drowsy all the time. The young woman from Oxford would be diagnosed with severe narcolepsy after receiving a flu vaccination in 2009. Belle suffers from terrifying hallucinations and sleep paralysis because of her condition. During an episode of sleep paralysis, she is aware of her surroundings but is unable to move or speak. Because of this, she's also quite scared of her constant napping and feels like she's unable to differentiate between reality and what her hallucinations produce. She used to fall asleep during class and was unable to hold down a job or even drive. Her personal life would be destroyed, as she'd often fall asleep on dates, and after years of living like this, she finally managed to control her condition with exercise. Belle says that it does keep her energized, and she also revealed that even her doctor inquired how much alcohol she was consuming when she went to seek help from him. Narcolepsy is a rare brain disease caused by the lack of a chemical named orexin, which regulates wakefulness. This leads to sleep attacks in which the person abruptly falls asleep and suffers from sleep paralysis and hallucinations. According to the NHS, there's no known cure for narcolepsy, but it can be managed by arranging naps throughout the day. Number 15. Gabe Dion. Gabe Dion was a little boy who would be diagnosed with a terminal genetic condition as a toddler. He suffered from a rare X chromosome mutation in his PIGA gene, and when he was 2 years old, he would remain mostly in bed. He would sometimes lie down on the floor with a parent on either side, and then his parents would cuddle their only child, who knew that they would eventually lose. The Hudsonville family would be informed by doctors that he would not live long. The little boy was always surrounded by medical equipment. A bag on his IV pipe dropped nutrition into his body, a monitor tracked his heart rate, an oxygen saturation, and an oxygen machine breathed life into his lungs. According to reports, there are less than 30 known cases of Gabe's condition in the world. His parents had been struggling with infertility before his birth and spent thousands of dollars on treatment. When they finally had Gabe, their dreams of having a happy and healthy family would be shattered. He had breathing problems ever since birth and also suffered from seizures. His health remained poor until finally in the spring of 2015 he would undergo genetic testing and was found to be suffering from a rare genetic X chromosome disorder. With the diagnosis, Gabe's mother realized her family history had some clues. 2 of her mother's male children had passed away from symptoms that were similar to Gabe's. Along with this, her sister lost a child when he was only 9 years old, but unfortunately Gabe passed away soon afterwards, and his parents made most of their time with him as they were already prepared for the worst.